I'm going to just give a quick overview of CHIP. So just to let you all know who we're talking to. So CHIP was CHIP manages the Building Blocks for Sustainable Communities program at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, where he's worked for 12 years. So prior to joining the EPA, CHIP had a career in higher education, working as an academic advisor at Georgetown University and at Johnston Community College in Smithfield, North Carolina. Chip has a BA in psychology from Chapel Hill and an MS in counseling from East Carolina and an MPA from George Mason University. So Chip, thank you so much for taking your time to chat with us today. We're really looking forward to it. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Stephanie. Welcome, everybody. I'll say also we have my colleague Sean Wilscombe from our HR office down in RTP. In our Durham office there, who can hopefully answer any questions that might come up as far as actually hiring and things like that. But I thought I would give an overview of EPA and just sort of generally what I do, and hopefully this can be sort of a more casual sort of thing. So as you have questions, feel free to bring those up. I'm going to share a brief PowerPoint presentation and just to do a quick overview and of the agency. And so, again, I work at the Environmental Protection Agency, where our mission, let me do sorry, I'm presentation mode here. Where our mission is to protect human health and the environment. So we do this in a number of ways the main way probably being implementing the environmental laws and statutes that are passed by Congress. We also do a lot of research, which helps to inform those laws and regulations, but also to just share with the public at large. And so we educate the public about environmental issues and ways to protect the environment. And then we work with states, localities, private industry to try to do a better job of protecting the environment and public health. The agency is organized largely at headquarters in DC by a lot of the laws that have been passed. So we have an Office of Air, an Office of Water, an office that deals with chemical issues and things. And then we also have 10 regional offices around the country who work directly with a certain subset of states. And so the region that handles North Carolina is Region 4 in Atlanta, which pretty much covers the entire Southeast. And this gives an idea of sort of where, again, the agency, sort of breakdown of the agency is sort of divided up by the different acts that have been passed by Congress. So again, the Office of Water handles the Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, Ocean Dumping Ban Act, all these different laws that have been passed. We have offices in a lot of places all over the country here. Again, there's sort of the 10 major regional offices, but then we have lots of labs and different offices like the one at RTP. So I work in a very small sort of subsection of the agency that's in the Office of Policy called the Office of Community Revitalization. And so we work with communities to help them on various growth and development issues. And so any issues they have as far as the ways that the environment impact the built environment in the city, so things like flood resilience and disaster resilience and things like that. And then the other way, the way that we build our cities impacts human health and the environment. So trying to help communities build in a way that's more walkable and bikeable, that handles stormwater in a better way. So we work with communities on things like green infrastructure and things like that. And we have worked all over the country, large communities and small communities, on things like helping with local food economies, equitable development, so affordable housing and sort of mixed use development, things like that. Again, flood resilience, disaster resilience, green infrastructure, and sort of trying to create infill development instead of sort of sprawling our development to help protect the environment. So that is my brief presentation here. Let me stop sharing. And I would love to have just a conversation with you guys, both either about specifically the work that my office does, working at the EPA, working at the federal government in general. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to kick us off if while we wait for questions. But can you share a little bit about how you actually started at the EPA? What did that experience look like for you?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I had a sort of previous career in higher education, and so yeah, at some point I sort of decided that the environmental issues were more. I did not do a great job in college of sort of career exploration and things, and my parents were teachers, and so I sort of naturally drifted toward education and went that route, and sort of as I was going through my 20s, realized that sort of I wanted to get involved in the environmental. Um, uh, Area. And of course, so I mean, growing up in small town North Carolina, I also never didn't know anybody that worked for the federal government. And after I moved up here, like everybody works for the federal government, so that sort of career area presented itself. And so yeah, so I went back to school, got another degree, and then was sort of looking around at different jobs in the environment. Nonprofits. And, at that time, this was in like 2006, 2007, there was sort of an increase in sort of the jobs on campus. And I thought that was an interesting area, given my previous experience of being like a sustainability coordinator at a university, but applied to a ton of federal jobs as well, and was able to get on at EPA through this great program called the Environmental Careers Program, which was sort of a hiring authority in which I was able to do. It was like a 2-year program of a small cohort of new hires, and we were able to do sort of get some experience across different offices at the agency, which was really great to get a sort of broad overview of the different parts, because it's a big agency, and like any organization, it's kind of siloed where the water people work on the water stuff and the air people work on the air stuff. And so it's good to get sort of a broader overview of how all of those things sort of fit together, because of course it's better when those things are able to sort of work in conjunction and work together when necessary. We do have some challenges with that sometimes. So, but yeah, so I came in through a sort of a hiring authority um, for a couple-year program, and yeah, I've been there ever since. I got really lucky to get on.
And is that the common way that people tend to get jobs with the EPA is going through the environmental careers program?
No, in fact, that it was sort of a federal hiring authority that each individual agency had, and they ended that program a couple of years after I came on. I think it has been restarted since then. I don't know if maybe Sean, if you have any information on that program or other things, but generally the way you get hired on is through the USA Jobs website, so usajobs.gov. Yeah, and just sort of apply that way. And I know there are some other ways that people are hired, but I'm not as familiar with that, which is why, again, I asked Sean to be on board here. Sean, do you have any information on that kind of thing?
I do actually. Hopefully, I work here and I do that. So if I didn't, you brought the wrong person. Um,
Right.
so I do. One of the things is the EPA and federal government as a whole has a whole lot of different hiring authorities, different situations as far as like veterans, pathways programs. Pathways programs are pretty cool because it's an internship, as well as uh, I can't think of the word. It's a pathways program is when you're an intern, you can work for a little while as long as you're still a student. And then shortly after that, you can come on and do the conversion. There's a couple different means or different ways to hire on in the pathways program. And I see a question here about marine conservation and EPA. EPA has such a diverse group of areas that it covers that, I mean, anything from education all the way up through, I think Gulf Breeze does a lot of the marine conservation and things like that. So there's definitely a lot of resources out there too to find these things. USA Jobs, as Chip mentioned, is really good. Their help section is amazing because it will also point out some of the hiring authorities that you may be qualified for, may be able to look into, or special A or Schedule A programs as far as like people with disabilities, people with special backgrounds. There's a huge, I guess, list of programs you can go through.
And I'll add too that I mean there are multiple ways to work with the EPA. So I mean on one hand is being a full federal employee, which is what Sean was just talking about. We also have various fellows programs that allow people to work in the agency and directly with us, but they're not technically federal employees. You're an employee. There's this ORISE program, ORISE. There's a couple other things like that. Sean may know some more about that. But there's also, we work with a lot of contractors as well. So there's a lot of companies that we work with directly. So my program, we usually hire, there are various planning firms that we work with that help facilitate and add some expertise to the way we work with communities. So there's a lot of organizations that we work with directly. Personally, I mean, being interested in the environment, there's a lot of other agencies that do a lot of work that either directly benefits the environment or that impacts the environment. So, I mean, there's certainly places like NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that does a lot of environmental work. But even things, of course, like the Department of Transportation. I mean, that transportation issues have a huge impact on the environment. As far as marine issues specifically, yeah, there's a good portion of our Office of Water that deals with oceanic issues and estuaries and things like that, that try to work on sort of the health of the oceans and reducing pollution in the oceans as well. I see Sean's put some links into the chat here with some information. Sean, there's a question here about jobs for data science. That's, I mean, a big field that we have and growing, of course. I mean, I think EPA is the last I knew was the third highest educated agency in the government. So there's, I think, NASA, NIH maybe, and then EPA. And we work very heavily with lots of data and research and things that are way over my head. And so, yeah, there's a lot of numbers being crunched to sort of inform how we do what we do, and increasingly different. So both as far as like really sort of hard science, chemistry, you know, and ecology type of things, and going through, I mean, one of the major emphases in this administration is going to be environmental justice. And so we have a lot of sort of data sets and mapping tools and information that help us identify communities of where people sort of minority and low-income communities that are disproportionately affected by environmental pollution. And so we use a lot of that data to help inform sort of where we're trying to address resource or put our resources to help people who need it the most. But yeah, so absolutely, there's again, that's a big area and an area that's growing, data science.
Looks like there's another question about how soon they can apply, and also so how soon they can begin applying to positions. I'm thinking that might mean more of like junior, senior year of when the timeline is, and then how do we find the contractor positions, and then what sort of skills are in demand right now? Great question.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, sorry, I mean, how soon to apply? I would say that definitely you can be looking for internships and things as an undergrad. Sadly, things are largely from a distance right now, but hopefully soon we'll be back in the office, and it's always great to have interns in the office. It's a great educational opportunity. It's a great opportunity to meet people and sort of get it in. A lot of times those interns are able to get jobs. And so the contractor positions, I mean, there's so many companies that do this work, and I mean, it's just going to be sort of a general job search, and it's going to depend on what your career field is. Again, in my office, we work with a lot of contracting, a lot of like planning, urban planning firms. But I know one of the companies that gets a lot of work is, this is not a plug or anything, but this company called Tetra Tech, which does a lot of like water and engineering work. I mean, there's a plethora of companies, and not working in like air and water. I'm sure there's a lot of companies that I don't know about that we pull from. Skills that are in demand. Sean, can you field that one?
I can. Going through all of the resumes that I've gone through in the last month, it looks like all of them. Everything from economists to education specialists, a lot of program analysts, a lot of budget analysts. There's a lot of physical scientists, earth science. I mean, you name it, it's out there. There's some social science positions that have recently been put out there. One of the things that's cool about the Pathways program I had mentioned earlier with the internship, normally that junior, senior year when you start applying is when you want to apply for those, because you still need to be a student through the duration of your employment for those internships. So the sooner the better. And as far as like with the recent graduates programs, you can start applying as long as you're within 2 years of your graduation. So up to 2 years from your graduation, you can still apply for those recent graduate positions. And a lot of those are entry level positions that pay on the entry level salary, but you get a lot of experience and you get kind of indoctrinated into the federal system, which can take some time to learn to navigate after a while, or after a while you become more familiar with. You can move around. The beautiful thing about the EPA too is there's a lot of places to move around to. There's a lot of upward mobility. There's a lot of like expansion on your skills. There's so many times that I'm processing people who used to be a physical scientist and now they're biologists, and people are going back to school, so we're switching all the time. And a lot of people grow within the EPA and stay here for a long time. So, but as far as skill sets goes, it looks like they're looking for all of them.
Sean, can you speak to a bit of what they can expect? So I know applying for jobs through the federal USA Jobs platform, it's a good bit different than applying maybe for corporate. Can you share a bit about what that looks like and then what students can do to stand out? So you mentioned looking at a lot of resumes. So what is it that they can start doing now to make sure that they are standing out in a good way?
Yeah, absolutely. That's I mean, just from a personal perspective, that's a good idea because it's frustrating going through resumes of highly qualified people who don't necessarily write their resumes to match the vacancies that they're applying for. So a lot of times I'll find people um, beautiful resumes, they're amazing, and it just does not touch on anything that the actual vacancy is looking for. So it's really important to look at the vacancy and read it and almost answer like their questions, right? So if it's asking you if you've done any type of specific data mining or if you've done any type of policy interpretation, whether you're a student or even doing it for a while, it's still important to put that on there so that we know that you meet those. A lot of times, the first steps of applying, you'll go through, you'll answer all the questions, but people forget about the resume. So they'll answer questions on the USA job site that'll ask specific to the position, and they'll say yes. Those are mainly used after the fact. It's your resume that's going to get you reviewed for in the first stages. So if your resume is great, but doesn't actually touch on any of the subjects that are necessary, you don't get referred. So it's important to read that vacancy and make sure that you're addressing everything that's in there. Another thing that's important is keep track, because sometimes it can take a long time and people get frustrated and they give up, but then they realize a couple of weeks later they're about to get an offer, or they re-announce a similar position in a different area. So EPA is really good about keeping things posted, and then when it comes to the actual selection part, we try really hard to get it done as quickly as possible. But like anything else in federal government, it's kind of yes, we got this done, but we got to wait just a little bit to make sure everything's moving forward. It's that hurry up and wait mentality. But it's important to keep track, because when people forget that they apply for things or when they give up, a lot of times there's something else out there that's even closer that we can use for something else or move people around. So there's a lot of certificate sharing. So when people make a certificate from one place, there's another office that may use the same certificate to choose from the same applicant pool. So that's something that's really important, you know. Um, sorry, so I read one of the questions that came in. But I think that's one of the important things. Let's see. Oh, okay, you had put that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say really quickly, I'll second, keeping track of what you've applied for. When I got my first job at Johnston Community College, I'd applied for so many things and did not keep track. And when I got called for an interview, I had no idea what the position was that I was going to go in and be interviewed for. So yeah, that's a good idea.
I literally forgot that I applied at the EPA until I got a phone call. Because it can take a while sometimes, because there's so many people that we're going through. I mean, I've had, especially with like student interns or the pathways programs, we had one certificate or one group of certificates that there were 2,000 applicants. So trying to scrub through, and it's all humans. It's all about, like, the computers or the systems don't do anything other than tabulate a score for the questions that you answer, but the rest of it is all humans reading resumes and making sure that they match up. So it can take a long time. So just keeping track.
So I just want to make sure I plug in the Career Center for this because I love that you mentioned how important it is to make sure that people are tailoring their resume because we talk about that a lot in our office as well. And so if I'm hearing you correctly, it's making sure that if you're reading the job description, that you're actually using some of the language from the job description in their resume. So making sure you're not sending the exact same resume to, or posting or submitting the exact same resume to every single position. Is that right?
Within reason, it's not a matter of like copying and pasting or anything, but a lot of it is, I mean, if it's asking for experience with and interpreting policy data, you want to have on your resume that there's policy data that you've interpreted, that between this year and this year, or this is the policy data that I've interpreted, this is why and how it was used. Because a lot of times, I mean, to interpret data is I can look at my bank account and say, all right, I spent too much. That's interpreting data, right? But that's not going to work if I'm trying to go into policy data. So it's kind of important to match the actual vacancy because once the vacancy's out there, it'll tell you everything that they're looking for. So your resume should say, yes, I've done all of these things, almost like you're answering a question. So does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So feel free if you all want feedback on your resume, you can certainly schedule an appointment with a career coach. And I put our drop-in hours in there. We have drop-ins virtually and in person. Same thing with appointments. We have in-person and virtual appointments. So if you want to get some feedback on your resume or kind of learn what Sean's talking about how to make sure that you're tailoring your resume to different job descriptions and postings, feel free to schedule an appointment. Um, so can you tell us a little bit about what the Pathways program looks like? So if you do have students that are applying, what can they expect in that experience? So if you can kind of even start with the application, how long it looks like they might have to wait, but then also what does that experience look like for them?
Sure. So it will be a little bit different depending on the program. Some programs are looking to hire really, really quickly. So they'll get in there, and once you apply, you're going to upload your resume or build your resume in USA Jobs. All applications have to come through USA Jobs. So you'll find them on Indeed sometimes, or you'll find different positions out there on some of the other sites. But those are being pulled from USA Jobs, and they're not always up to date. They're not always 100% correct with the dates that they have on there. So once you go to USA Jobs, you're going to upload all your information. If there's anything specific that the vacancy is going to ask for, you'll see down at the bottom when you're applying, it'll say required documents. Make sure that those are in there. So it'll ask you for transcripts, it'll ask you for any certifications, or I had mentioned earlier about Schedule A disability hiring. So if you qualify for that, make sure you have a Schedule A letter. If you're a veteran, you put your DD-214, any veteran letter that you may have. So once you upload all of your information, the vacancy will be open for a certain amount of time. With the student quals or with the student interns, oftentimes it'll be open for about a week, about 10 days. Once it closes, then a staffer like myself or somebody else in the office will go through each one of them. So it could be a couple of weeks before you hear anything. So you'll get a notification that says that your application was accepted. That just means that we've noticed it, we've acknowledged it, and we're going to start going through them. It'll be, depending on how many applicants there are, it'll be about a week, 2 weeks before we go through all of them. And then all of the qualified will get, or anybody who's not qualified will be notified. Anybody who is qualified will be forwarded. And then the hiring manager will go through and do the same process, and they'll choose the interviews and they'll choose everything that they're going to do. So you're looking, I mean, it's pretty easy to stay at least 90 days from application before any like solid notification comes through. Sometimes a little bit sooner, but to stay safe, I would say about 90 days. And then they do the selection. You go through a security background check, which we have way less control over and a whole lot longer wait period for. They come back sometimes in a couple of weeks, and sometimes they come back a little over a month. And then after that, they get an offer for their official offer with the start date, and then they go from there. So things have been a little bit different now because of the whole stay at home and COVID, but for the most part, we're getting back on track with all that. So does that answer the question?
Yes, that's perfect. Can you talk a little bit about, in thinking about resumes, what do you look for, or what are things that you all find impressive aside from internships?
I missed part of the question. I'm sorry.
Sorry. So when you think about looking at resumes, are there things that students can think about doing now? I know internships are great and we certainly want students to think about internships, but are there other things that you find impressive as well that students have on their resumes?
Yes, actually. So as far as the selecting officials, they're the ones who are going to look a little bit more into any clubs that people may be a part of or any organizations that they're a part of, they work with, that they would know more. The one thing that's important that I like to stress to people is the staffer that is reading your resume does not always know 100% the position or the details of the position. So we're just looking for the key stuff that we put in the vacancy announcement. And those vacancy announcements are built using a subject matter expert in that program who knows everything that they're looking for, and then we build it, announce it. So when we're looking at the resumes, we really want to make sure that the things in the resume meet not only the experience that they're looking for, but also like the KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and abilities, right? So um, if your resume is tailored to really interpret your experience to the staffer based on the vacancy, that's what the important thing is, because again, I keep going back to the policy data, but I mean, if you've interpreted policy data, that's something that you should put out there, especially if it's in the announcement. Um, the other things that work, like a lot of times customer service doesn't seem like much, but customer service is a big deal because that's you dealing with a bunch of other people. Because the one thing about federal government, there's a whole lot of backgrounds, there's a whole lot of people who come from military backgrounds or other federal agencies or state agencies. Or, I mean, it's such a diverse group. You have to kind of learn to adapt and adjust your communication skills sometimes. So it's important to put those things in there too, as far as like, essential in team or working in teams or, things like that. Like to build on your strengths, as it's stated in the vacancy announcement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so what I hear you say is there's not necessarily groups or clubs or organizations, things that they're doing as long as they're choosing or really showcasing the things that they've done that fit what's in the job description. Is that right? Just to make sure.
Sean, it looks like you're on mute if you're answering.
Sorry, I just realized I was muted. It was the greatest answer ever, too. That's what's terrible. No, I apologize. Yeah, in short, essentially, I'm looking for all the qualifications and everything that's going to get you forwarded. And then this hiring official and the selecting official are going to be the ones who are looking at if there's any specific clubs that may relate to the experience or that may help you or benefit. Not necessarily if you weren't a part of a club, you won't make it. It's just how does that experience relate to the position?
Beautiful. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then it looks like Maggie had a question about opportunities for grad students.
Yeah, again, the Pathways program is one to look at. USA Jobs is a great tool because if you're going on to USA Jobs, you can actually like sort it for your specific hiring preference. So if you're looking for an internship or a Pathways program or a recent graduate program, you can select that and it'll actually send you notifications when new announcements are made. So if there's an announcement in DC that you're looking at and you didn't get selected for that one, you can sort your search. Oh, that was hard to say. Sort your search to send you notifications when positions that are similar to that are sent out again. So there's definitely a lot of positions out there at all levels.
Great. I have one question that was sent in privately, but to clarify, how soon out should we apply to have the best chance of having a position upon graduation? For active duty, it's 120 days out from the time of the closing of the announcement that you must be available to start, or is that, or at least that's what it says, or that they're reading on the internet. Is that the rule for everyone, or can we apply sooner than that?
No, you can definitely apply sooner than that. A lot of times the program itself will work with you on the start dates. With the active duty, the reason for the 120 days because you don't actually have the separation. So you can't really double dip into a federal system. So you can't get paid by the federal government while you're still working for the federal government. So you still need that separation time. So that 120 days is specifically like your EAOS, estimated time of separation, right? So you have to be after that. You can still apply and provide. There's the other form that's not the DD-214, and it's signed by your command essentially that says, yes, they will be getting out at this time. This is the expected character of service when they separate. But again, that's different for the active duty. As far as students go, you can apply, 6 months out, 4 months out, as long as the vacancies are still open and out there within a reasonable amount of time. So if you're not going to graduate for about a year, it wouldn't be wise to start applying now. But if you're within that 6 months, 4, 5, 6 months, it's definitely a good idea to start looking into it because the programs are willing to work with a lot of people. I hired a guy in February who's not starting until May. So January, I'm sorry. He was offered in January. So they'll definitely work with you if they have the opportunities.
So can you give an example, Sean or Chip, what a career path can look like? So if somebody does get hired in for like right after undergraduate, what does their experience look like? How long is there kind of an average of how long people tend to stay in one job before potentially moving up? Because I know you guys mentioned that there's opportunities for growth. Is there kind of an average of what that looks like?
Um, I can answer from my side of it. I have seen people who, after 17 years, have decided to move to a different position only because, like, their wife was moving. I've seen so many people who work in the same spot for a really long time because they love what they do. I've also seen people who hire on, and then 2 years later, they say, "Well, I want to work in the Office of Water, or I want to work in Office of Policy, or I want to go to NCEE," like the different programs. Um, and I think the EPA has a pretty good culture about kind of growth from within, promote from within. So everybody's very supportive of gaining new experiences. And a lot of times the offices and the programs work so closely together that you can kind of translate your experience into their programs and vice versa. So from what I've seen, there's a range. There's a wide range of how long people stick around, but it's movement and success is definitely promoted here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really varies. I mean, people that have, a really specific niche that they really love and are highly educated in will often stay in that thing for a long time. But I mean, I would say, especially in terms of advancement, like career advancement, a lot of times that's going to be skipping around the agency. You'll be a staffer in one office, and there'll be a position for like an assistant office or division director in, the Office of Water, Office of Air, or somewhere else. So to get that promotion, a lot of times you will move to a different office and kind of around the agency. And again, that's really encouraged, I would say. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities, number one, to work with people in other parts of the agency. And so you're learning a lot about a lot of different things, but certainly to move and doing, 4 to 6 month details in a different office and then coming back to your office and moving around is definitely, possible and encouraged. And especially, I mean, like me, I'm kind of a generalist anyway. And so I certainly could move to a lot of different parts of the agency or regional office or, a lot of different places. The important thing is getting your foot in the door and being there, and you can stick it out where you are or move around. And it's, it's a lot of great opportunities for sure.
It sounds like there's a little bit of everything for whatever people are looking for. If you want to
Yeah,
stay
and
in one spot.
there's a lot of transition and stuff as well. I mean, I was in an office for my first 5 years, or in a division in my first 5 years that got, they just ended that division. They moved that work to a different part of the agency and sort of disbanded the people that were in my division. And so they said, okay, here are your options of where you can go within sort of our broader office. And so that's how I ended up in this office where I am now, about 5 years ago. So
Perfect. Well, we have a little bit left. Any other questions that folks are curious about or things that Chip or you or Sean, either one, are interested or think it might be helpful for them to know as they're thinking about applying for the EPA?
Actually, so if I could real quick, as an HR, from an HR standpoint, I would say also as an applicant standpoint, the first hurdle is going to be frustration with trying to apply for federal positions because there's a lot of competition and there's also kind of limited spacing. But don't give up. Please don't give up. I mean, I've read resumes 13 or 14 times because people applied for the same position. And there's times that I get excited, like, yes, they got selected because I've read that resume so many times. People do, they show up, they move in. So frustration is going to be the baseline for a little bit. But after that, just keep trying, just keep plugging away.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly worth the effort. I mean, I've definitely loved it in my time at the EPA and the federal government. Um, and I would say that right now, my guess is going to be that there's going to be some hiring. We've gone through several years, or a bunch of years where we've kind of declined in employees. I think across the federal government, but EPA specifically. And so I imagine that there may be sort of an uptick as we move forward. But I'd say also look at the state agencies as well. I mean, our new administrator was selected from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. So there's movement there as well, and good work to be done at the state and local levels too.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much. I see that you added your information to the chat, so thank you so much. Anybody
Yeah,
else
thank
have
you.
questions, feel free. But thank you guys for coming today. And Chip and Sean, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days to share with us. So again, feel free if you want to schedule an appointment with the Career Center just to talk about your materials, feel free to do that. But thank you guys for being here and for sharing some wisdom. Y'all have a good rest of your day.
You
Thanks a
too,
lot.
thank
Good
you.
luck, everybody.
Thank you.